Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, I've brought to you a wonderful, a marvellous young fella from across the water. Now, you may remember his name because he was on the show quite a lot and very popular, ladies and gentlemen. And then all of a sudden he mysteriously disappeared. And many of people were saying, what happened to that bloke who you got on who was so knowledgeable and was able to sort of fight back against all the unlawful things that were going on in this world? And I said, I don't know. I've not got a phone number for him. I've tried emailing him. He doesn't write. He doesn't get in touch. The love affair is over, it seems. But no, he has come back. The wonderful Stan McDonald. Stan, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Richard. It's good to be back.
It's good to have you. And I know that you had to suddenly make a disappearance from up in Lancashire, where you were based in England, back to your hometown in Canada.
Yeah, because the government only allows you to stay over there for a certain duration of time, and I kind of extended that. I applied for some stuff and I had to wait for an answer, and then once they came back with the answer of no, so they basically gave me an ultimatum: you leave or we make you leave. So rather than break the law, I just decided to cooperate with them, and I returned to Canada. And I had some issues here I had to straighten out anyway. So that's just how it went. And I've been dealing with legal stuff, and it just seems to never end.
Well, you were very popular when you were on the show, and it's so great to have you back. And I should just explain for those viewers watching, I've got a croaky voice because I've had a little bit of a sore throat, but it hasn't stopped me from trying to carry on and do what was right. And today, we're going to do the Stan McDonald's pushback against the council tax.
Yes, the council tax we've done before, but
Hmm.
there's new things, new evidence, or new arguments that could be used against council tax. So I would suggest that people go back to Richard's previous presentations and go over some of that because I don't want to repeat what we've done before. I'm going to touch on it, but I'm going to give you some new evidence or new ammunition, if you will, against the fight of council tax.
And I will try and find in the huge numbers of videos now that I've done the original video we did together and put the link in the description because I know how tricky it can be going back a few months to try and find these things. I haven't labeled them particularly brilliantly, but there we are. But I will do my best in the description to put that. So I've got a number of slides that you've sent me so
Yeah.
we can work through those. And fortunately, in this, you're doing most of the talking and explaining, and I can rest the old throat a little.
Sure.
Brilliant. Okay, so let me press a few buttons here, and we'll start with our strategies here, as it says.
Yeah, for avoiding council tax, legal considerations. There's a number of things that when you get into this council tax, it actually becomes fairly in-depth. And part of the process that we've covered before is that the council tax doesn't actually conform to standard court procedures. And we're going to go through a few things today that are additional arguments that a person could use. And there is actually quite a bit more that could be expanded on this, but in order to keep this within the roughly hour time frame, I've just pointed out some major key elements.
Hmm.
So if you go to the next slide, Richard, we'll get rolling.
Righto.
The council tax enforcement process typically begins with the issuance of a notice to the taxpayer regarding their liabilities. And many people have seen these notice of liabilities, but the courts or the council actually turn around and stipulate that it's an order from the court, and it's actually not. Okay, and there's been a lot of concerns raised over the process of these lists because these lists are done in bulk and they use computer software that's been confirmed, and they could have errors in them. Okay, and there may be some of your viewers that don't wish to actually challenge the council tax as far as getting right away from it. Some people might just say, well, I would like a discount or I would like some help or some issues
Yeah.
are incorrect with their council tax. And so I'm covering both sides of the road here. I'm going to give you some information that you can use if you are facing financial difficulty or other considerations, because a lot of people don't realize that even if you're not trying to get out of paying council tax entirely, there are some certain avenues that you can go through and potentially get a discount. And then for those of you that want to turn around and go further with it, we can cover some of that too. But
And it's interesting you say that just briefly because that's exactly what an email I had the other day saying that they didn't want to challenge the whole whether it's fake or whatever, but they went
right,
through something and they got it reduced from whatever it was to 30 something pounds a month, which was incredible. So I said it sounds like a bargain.
yeah, well, because many people are scared of the courts, and there's no even if you're 100% right in your argument, there's no guarantee that you're going to get what should be yours, especially when you go through these private hearings.
Yeah.
And that becomes one of the issues because when you get these council tax notices, the council has actually confirmed to me on the phone that they work on behalf of the court, works on behalf of the council. So that's a conflict of interest.
Absolutely.
They're
It's
supposed to
complete
work on,
bias.
yeah, they're supposed to work on behalf of the legal system and of the law and follow the statutes, and they clearly don't. Yeah.
So let's crack on.
Okay. Yeah, the implications of the errors, even if there's a mistake, and if you get hauled into court, so-called court, they turn around and they don't care. The only thing they seem to give a crap about is did you get the notice and did you pay the bill? They
Yeah.
don't seem to care about why. So I'm advocating that people try to settle this issue before it goes to the court. Okay.
Yes.
And
If you
some of
can stay out of court, the better.
the better, yeah, because then there's the liability costs and they add stuff to it and everything else. Now there's a lot of concerns because they use software and they do like a bulk listing. And what they'll do is they'll send over a whole list of, I don't know, 1,400 people or whatever it is. And there's no way, logically thinking, in say an 8 hour day, that they can actually consider everybody's case based on the merits. This is the whole problem.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why they don't care. Did you get the bill? Did you pay it? They don't care that you had, some financial difficulty or something major happened. They don't care. And because there could be errors on those notices, if you read the liability notice, they say you can't bring up certain arguments when you go to these hearings. So if you can't bring up a certain argument or a certain point or fact and they don't care, then how is this actually a real court case?
Exactly.
Right? So there's a lack of transparency and accountability through this enforcement process. And then what you have to do if it goes that far and you don't agree with it, then you have to go through an appeals process. And I'm not going to cover it today, but we can do a separate presentation for somebody that wants to do this appeal if they didn't get a fair hearing, which is highly likely in this case. So that's where it goes. Now, taxpayers facing these council tax enforcements have legal rights and remedies available to them to challenge these decisions, whether they you know get a proper court case or they don't. They still have certain rights, and this is the purpose of this because this presentation is to make them aware of these rights, and if they want, they can seek legal advice. They're not going to get it through through the lawyers and stuff because they're all part of the problem. And
Yeah.
one of the issues with any lawyer is they're a member of let's just say the legal profession or the bar association, as is the judge, as is the court. And when they go into court, they're an officer of the court, but the court is all rigged in order to keep this facade going, right? The
Yeah.
legal society. So you can do legal remedies and try and file a judicial review and complaints to the regulatory bodies, and this is part of the appeals process. Now, in my research in doing this slide presentation, I found out that actually there was a lady justice, and they said you're supposed to follow these legal procedures, and it's gone on over several years, and the courts just don't do it, neither do the council, and so they're not even following their own rules, and they were
No.
made aware of it. So, what kind of justice system is that, right?
Exactly.
So, and we can complain to these regulatory bodies, but they don't care. I actually wrote a letter, well, a number of months ago now, and it was sent to the chancellor, who's in charge of the entire legal system. And I explained to that person that, there's several people that are sitting in jail because of council tax, and that's a criminal offense, yet this is a civil case. And what you'll find when you deal with these so-called magistrates courts, they will take even a simple traffic ticket or a speeding ticket or a parking ticket, and they'll try and apply it in a criminal matter so they can put you in jail. And they're not allowed to do that.
Right.
So usually I've been finding that if you do your paperwork right, at least in the UK, for the most part, they at least somewhat listen, but you're still going to have an uphill battle. This is why I said earlier that maybe some people don't want to challenge the whole validity of the council tax because they don't want the thing to take off, 6 to 8 months, maybe a year to deal with an issue,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to give you arguments both ways, both ways. So if we can go to the next slide, Richard, we'll okay. The only thing we can do, and this is partly why it's good to be on your show, is media exposure. Because for those that don't know, the media is bought and paid for. There's
Yeah.
a handful of companies that own all of the media, the newspapers. And when I tried to get the word out previously on other issues that dealt with property taxes in Ontario or whatever, they had the same problem. They even wrote back to me. One outfit wrote back and said, "We get our news from dedicated news sources." So what we have to do is expose this. And actually, in one of the presentations we did earlier, I actually showed where the council was divesting in military stuff because they were invested in companies like BlackRock and Lockheed Martin. So what it says in the legal system, and we'll get into this later, is that the funds that are provided to the councils are supposed to be for the benefit of all, benefit of the people in the district, right?
Yeah.
Well, how is investing in these other, arms things and military stuff, how is that supposed to serve any function? So
Not
we
quite.
have to, as people, get the word out. And thankfully, there's your program to be able to do that.
Well, that's very kind of you. And thanks for the big consignment of chocolate bars to pay for your services on the channel here. All bought and paid for.
Yeah. No, well, the thing is, I'm not doing this for any benefit, really. I'm doing it for the
No.
benefit of all, right? The same
Yeah, no,
reason you do
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Right. We'll move on to the next
the
one.
next one, yeah. And so what we need is basically the people, the public, to stand up to this tyranny. Okay. And this is why your show is one of the good, I think it's probably one of the only platforms that actually has a total open forum and people can bring anything forward. There's certain people that are in this movement that are doing things, but most of them don't. They just stick to one specific topic. And this is the one great thing about your program because, anything goes. Then, as you've said to people many times, don't take our word for it. We're giving you some information. And then it's up to you to turn around and check it out and verify it's correct or it's up to date. Because the records and the statutes and the remedies, they all change somewhat. But here's the thing. If something the government is doing or the court is doing is based in fraud doesn't have an expiration date. So anybody that's paid into council tax or been railroaded by the legal system for whatever reason, but parking ticket or whatever, they have a fair, like a recourse, right? They have
Yes.
a right to a fair and equitable enforcement practice. Just paying for the court, and they don't care, and they even tell you right on the summonses that you're not allowed to bring any arguments into court. So I would suggest that everybody try to file their paperwork with the council prior. And there's another issue with the council in itself. When it does get into this magistrate's court, you don't even file paperwork within the court itself. You file it with the magistrate. And do you honestly think your adversary is going to give that to the court? Not that it would make any difference anyway. So you're not getting a fair trial. It's just impossible, right?
Mm.
And it's all about making money and revenue. So people have to stand up and say, okay, we'll pay the taxes if they wish to do so once the system's reformed.
Exactly. That, I mean, and that's what it
That's what we're here
definitely
for.
needs. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, council tax was gotten rid of before, but back then it was called poll tax,
Yes.
right? So it did work. So if somebody says, well, There's no evidence what you're telling us will work. Yeah, well, it'll work if we stand up. If everybody refused to pay council tax, you know, if everybody did that, something would change.
Exactly. Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
the poll tax was very easy, I think, for people to get a grip on how unfair it was, particularly the amount that they were charging each and every individual. And I remember it.
yeah,
Although, in fact, I thought at the time that it was, if they'd reduced the amount of money, it was a fairer system because you could count how many people were in the house. But because they put the money up so high, it seemed extremely unfair, and they weren't going to shift on it. And then
right.
suddenly you've got the council tax, and then you've got all this shenanigans in the courts, in which you, as you say, you can't bring any arguments up. And then there's the whole liability business, that if you're not there to hear it, has it really happened? You've got the fact that the council themselves are, that you have to go to the claimant to ask them if you can have your day in court, which is a most ridiculous situation.
Yeah,
There's so much wrong with the whole situation, and the fact that they're all basically in each other's camps and there to make money. The whole thing needs an absolute reform. And
right.
we know that, and the people know that. Not all the people, sadly, but they're just holding on to their power and just bashing people over the head in their attitude on trying to get that money out of people.
Exactly. So what we're going to uncover today is there's a few more arguments that I brought forward that we can basically put some more sticks in the spokes, if you will,
Mm.
go down their system, right? So council tax, this is going to surprise the crap out of people. Council tax is a local taxation system that's basically levied on non-domestic property. It's not residential like you think, and we're going to prove that today.
Well,
Okay?
now that did you told me that the other day? I just
Yeah,
stopped you there because you told me that the other day, and we had a little catch up chat, and I was like,
yeah,
my jaw was on the floor because thinking, well, is this even levied at businesses because they have business rates,
yeah,
and yet council tax seems to be put on every resident, as they call it, in the town, and
yeah.
we all, those of us who are perhaps a bit more compliant, just go, all right, fair enough, whatever, and don't challenge anything. So that is fascinating.
Yeah, well, like you just said, oh, well, that's fair enough, and they carry on with it. Well, watch this. This is where you got to see the details are in the statute. The details are in the actual paperwork, the documents. So what I always tell people to do is go back to the original source, the original document.
Mm.
And when you do that, print the sucker out and put it in a binder somewhere so you don't have a hard drive failure or some other crap. And away we
Yep.
go. Okay. Now the system was introduced, the Local Government Finance Act in 1992. So go back to that sucker.
Yep.
Okay. Now, when that was supposedly, and I say supposedly, approved through Parliament, that's the version that was approved. But then if they make an amendment to it, another amendment, those weren't necessarily approved. And I don't believe any of it was approved anyway. But anyway, there you go. So the purpose of what they'll tell you is the purpose of the council tax is to fund government services such as police, fire, and education and waste management.
Yep.
However, when I talked to them and when it went through court, and it was actually stated that this council tax doesn't pay for any particular product or service. So what they do, and this is where we get into the problem, what they do is they throw it into basically a pot, a consolidated fund, and then they siphon off what they want. Okay,
Mm.
and council tax is allegedly based on the value of the property as of April 1st, 1991. Well, what happens if a tree fell on your house, Richard? Is your house worth what it was back in 1991?
No.
No, you had to repair it. And then
Yeah.
your house is falling apart because everything ages and it wears out and it has to be replaced. So you need a proper assessment on your property in order to have this council tax thing, even remotely close to being correct. Okay. Now
Yeah.
they say it's placed on one of the bands based on their value. Well, your neighbor's house might have been, you might be in a new subdivision and you're one of the older houses that hasn't been replaced or repaired. So how could your house be that equal to your neighbor? So that's another line of malarkey. Like when I dealt with my house here in Canada, I've had to fix spuds. I had to rewire the place, re-insulate it, do all kinds of stuff. So if my neighbor's house, looks like my house, but maybe he didn't have to do all the work I did, there's got to be a difference in property value. And what they don't account for when you do a property assessment, if you have a house and you do a bunch of work to it, say it's, 35, 40 years old, they don't say, okay, well, the way they work it, let's just say hypothetically your house costs £100,000 if we use, UK terms, and then you replace your roof. There's $10,000, okay, or £10,000. Then maybe you pave the driveway, because it was gravel. Well, there's
Hmm.
£10,000. So they add £20,000 to this thing. Now your house is worth £120,000. Well, what happened to the stuff you had to replace? They didn't give you any depreciated value. So the housing market's all screwed up. And if you remember not too long ago, about 8 to 10 months ago, the municipality said they were going to raise the amount of people's property taxes, the council tax, in order to pay for the expanding cost of fire and police services. But as you're about to find out, they can't legally do that. So if we go to the next slide, we'll get into this a little further. Okay, now I just want to show you here on the Local Government Finance Act that we're dealing with the Local Government Finance Act. So I just brought this up, and because
Yeah.
you can't see the entire screen, I'm showing you that this is what we're following, and you can go to the website, and I pulled up the most current version to show you. But if you look on the bottom there, it says C1 and C2. It says Act Modified, and it gives you the reference. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this happens in all your statutes and all your acts, and you need to look into those things, read those suckers, because that's where you're going to find your truth. Okay, so if we go to the next screen, we'll see where we are. Okay, now it says Local Government Finance Act, and it says number 1, council tax in respect to dwellings, as regards in the finance year beginning in 1993, subsequent financial years, each building authority shall, in accordance with this part, levy and collect a tax to be called council tax, which shall be payable in respect to the dwellings situated in the area. Well, based on that, if you listen to that, what's a dwelling? Look that up, okay? And it says
Yeah.
in this part, the building authority means a district, okay? A district, so it tells you you're not even in an actual area that's dealing with it, because that tells you right there, every court is a district court. They don't tell you that part. Or London Borough Council. Okay, and then it says the Common Council or the Council in the Isles of Sicily. Well, wait a second. How does that fit in with my district? So it says any district or London Borough. Okay, we'll give them that one. Okay, for the purpose of this part, the Secretary of State may make regulations containing the rules for treating and dividing as to the building authority, if part or only of the dwelling falls within that area. Well, doesn't that kind of indicate that maybe not some of these dwelling units are non-taxable? It doesn't say every one. It says, basically within the building, if part or only of the dwelling falls within the area. So it leads some speculation that maybe some of these dwelling spaces are non-taxable,
Right.
which we're about to look into. Because it doesn't say everybody.
No.
No. So you've got to read between the lines a little bit. Now, if we go to the next slide, we're going to find out some more useful stuff. Now, I would normally ask Richard to read all that. Maybe I will, because it may be a little clearer on his screen. But if you read look at the meanings of dwelling in this section, okay? This is where we get the definitions from dwelling.
Right.
Now, I hate to ask you to do this, but if you look through there, and maybe Richard doesn't want to read this because he's not too good. But if
No,
you
I
see
can.
there under M1 and M2, it tells you what on the bottom of the screen what M1 and M2 is. This is the key, guys, right here. M1 and M2. So I'm gonna ask Richard to read that. I highlighted the whole bloody thing.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up so it's nice and big on my screen.
Yeah, okay.
Let me just cut to this so we go a bit closer in.
Oh, there we
So,
go.
yeah. So which one do we want?
Just start from the top and we'll just carry on. I'll
Oh,
stop
okay.
you
The meaning
periodically.
of dwelling. Okay. So this section has an effect for determining what is a dwelling for purposes of this part, and two, subject to the following provisions of this selection, or this section rather. A dwelling is a property which, by virtue of the definition of here determinant in section 115 bracket 1 of the M1 general rate
Yeah. General Rates
General
Act.
Rate Act 1967 would have been a here. How do you pronounce this word? Here determinate? Is it?
Yeah. Look,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're having problems with that word because I need you to look that word up. If you guys want to check into it, look that word up because that's the key to cracking the safe right there.
Oh, right. Okay. Here determinate of. I've got a cold, which is my. I'm going to stick with that as my
Excuse? Okay.
excuse. Yeah, a purpose and act to remain a purpose of that act, and if that act remain in force, and is not for the time being shown or required to be shown in a local or a central non-domestic rating list in the force at the time.
Right there, non-domestic. See this?
Yeah.
It has to meet all the criteria of this thing. But anyway, so it has to be in this non-domestic rating it lists at the time.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, we are defining the word dwelling in their thing. So
Yeah,
it's
and it's
non-domestic is not for
yeah,
the time being exempt from local non-domestic rating for the purpose of Part 3 of this Government Finance Act of 1988,
yep.
and in applying paragraphs B and C have no account shall be taken as any rules as to Crown exemption.
So what does that
Uh,
tell us, Richard? If it's non-domestic, okay,
yep, yep.
right? What's that telling us, right?
Well, it's not a place that you live in, is it? Or it's for work,
Right.
industry.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up that word wherever it is here. Determate or whatever it is. Here it is. I'm just looking it up. I'll bring that onto the
Bring it up on the
screen.
screen. Yeah, we'll get back
Yeah.
to this one anyway. You have the technology to do this.
Yeah. Can you see that there? Is that on
Yep.
it? Here we go.
Yep. Perfect.
So
Property capable of being
inherited.
Yeah. Okay.
Any kind of property capable of being inherited, property that before 1926 passed to an heir, if not otherwise disposed of by will.
Right. And this tells you that you can then there we can get it. This is a separate issue, but that tells you you can get into something where maybe that property is non-taxable. And if it's done through a land patent land grant, which is another whole presentation into itself, it becomes non-taxable.
Wow.
Yeah.
So so this is what people have got to go back. I mean, we're just touching the surface of
Touching
this,
the
really.
surface. Yeah.
Right. Where were we? Do you want that slide back up
Yeah,
again?
bring that slide back and we'll carry on going. So
Okay.
it's telling you right there, it deals with non-domestic property now. Okay.
Yeah. Which is a shocker, I think, for most of us.
Yeah. Non-domestic, for those guys that don't understand, is commercial. So
Yeah.
this thing has to apply to a commercial property. Right?
Which, of course, most people aren't living in a commercial. I mean, who does live in a commercial property?
Nobody does.
Exactly.
Nobody does. So it would apply to businesses. Now, your government is supposed to provide, basically the necessities of life. And there's been people that live on the land, so to speak, and the government comes along, kicks them out, and then they apply to the local council, and they have to provide them a place to live. Right? Well, if that's the case, then the council doesn't tax itself. So if it doesn't tax itself, and you don't fit in as non-domestic, right? Then okay, then probably wouldn't apply to you either. Now, if we blow that back up and we'll carry on the rest of this, it gets even worse. But that was the big key. You got to go forward one, Richard. You went backwards. Okay, now you're really screwing this up.
Oh, sorry. I've gone forward, sir.
Yeah. Okay, now can you bring up the rest, blow this back up so we can see the rest of it?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Blow it back up. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, make it bigger.
Yeah, I've got to just get back to where... hang on a minute. Where the hell did I put the picture? Here it is.
Right. So it says applying paragraphs B and C. So it's not optional. We can't take out one piece or the other piece. They have to be done together. Right? Because we're under the definition. So it has to fit everything within this specification.
Yeah.
Now keep reading and it gets even because this kind of more fixes it up. Now.
Right.
You go. Now,
so
there.
we were back here, weren't we? So
Yep.
I wish I could pronounce this word. Here determent in
Yep.
redeterment here
Yep.
whatever. It is composited. Oh, hang on a
Yeah,
minute. Let me just get this word because I want to hear it. And there's a thing, isn't there? Where's that bloody page gone? Oh, I'm all over the place. Let's just write it in here.
that's all right. As long as we get it, we're done.
That's the meaning. I want pronunciation. Let's just get this pronounced. Normally they have a little... Oh, here we go. Let's hope we don't go through hours of...
Hereditament.
1 minute.
Hereditament. Hereditament. Okay. I can go with that. Hereditament. Thank you. I mean, the audience is probably just shouting at me. But a hereditament, which is a composite hereditament for the purposes of Part 3 of the 1988 Act, and would
Right
still...
there. Part 3. Keep that's key right there. Part 3. You're going to watch how this blows the whole thing to smithereens. That
Right.
letter is the key. Okay, if everybody forgets everything and just remember part 3, we're gonna really mess this up, because that part
Okay.
3 is the key to the whole bloody thing.
You see, the thing about this stuff is it's written in such a way as it, to the lay person, it's very difficult to interpret. But to somebody like you who's been doing this for 30 odd years, this is, you know, you spot these things almost immediately. Do you want me to carry on?
Carry
Are you
on,
laughing?
yeah, because it's gonna even prove it further. Okay.
Right. Okay. So part 3 of that act, and would still be such a hereditament. I've forgotten how he pronounced it.
That's fine.
But if paragraphs B to D of section 66(1) of that act, domestic property, were omitted.
Right. So domestic property is being omitted. Well, what do you live in, my friend? You live in domestic property.
Yeah.
So guess what? Council tax. Does it apply to domestic property? Because domestic property is omitted. It says right there.
Yeah, would still be in a hereditament if paragraph D of section 66(1) of that act, domestic property, were omitted.
Yeah.
Is also subject...
So in other words, if property can be passed down,
yeah,
okay, it's subject to the council tax, even if domestic property is omitted from that. Converted back to standard English instead of this legal garbage. Now it carries on. Okay? Subject to section 6 below, none of the following property, namely a yard. Okay, so your yard's non-taxable, so if you live on a 1 acre lot or a 12-acre lot or a postage stamp, who cares? The garden's exempt, outhouse is exempt, or other, thing, a property that's wholly for the purpose, or a private garage, right? And they're even telling you right here, if the garage isn't taxable, unless it's bigger than a certain 25 square meters, used wholly or mainly for the accommodation of motor vehicles, I think it says, yeah, private motor vehicle, or private storage premises. Okay?
Yeah.
Mainly for domestic, right there. Private storage premises used wholly or mainly for the storage of articles of domestic use. Well, what the heck is your house?
Well, that's true. You're storing articles of domestic use, aren't you? You've got a sofa and you may have got a telly. I'd advise you to throw it away. But you'll have other things, kitchen and what have you.
Now, keep reading.
Okay.
A dwelling, except for the foreign part of a larger property, which is self a dwelling in virtue of subsection 2 above. Okay?
Yeah.
The Secretary of State may, by order, provide such case to be prescribed by or determined under the order. Anything which would, apart from the order, be one dwelling shall be treated as 2 or more dwellings, and anything which be apart from the other be 2 or more dwellings shall be treated as 1 dwelling. Okay? The Secretary of State may make an order and definition of a dwelling which for the time being is effective for the purpose of this part. So from reading that, I mean, it'll take a while to digest it. Doesn't that seem to indicate that a private residence would not be taxable? Because it says
I'm taking a lot from your interpretation, but it does seem like that.
Yeah, because the yard's non-taxable. Places to store your domestic stuff is not taxable.
Right. So I mean,
garage
other than
isn't taxable.
So I mean, it is an odd situation because you're dwelling in it, as in you are lingering as you dwell in it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if it's an area that's got domestic business, a sideboard, a sink, a kitchen table, if that's all not taxable, what part of it is?
exactly. Read between the lines because that's where the truth is.
But why, why would they bother to do that? Why would they set it up to be? Why would they not just set it up and go, well, your house is the thing? Why have they made it so awkward for themselves if they are discovered? And that's what I don't understand.
I suspect, and I can't prove it, but I suspect that at one time, because you were using property to like have a business, gain revenue, then you were taxed. At one time, when you were driving your vehicle on the road, driving the word drive or driver is commercial. So because you were using the road for commercial purposes, you had to pay a
Right.
tax. If
You've
you're
just
using your property for commercial purposes, you'd pay a
you
tax.
you've just hit the nail on the head, haven't you? It's
Yeah.
all about commerce. It's all about, and it goes right back to this whole birth thing, that
Yeah.
the legal fiction and stuff, that because your home is private,
Yeah.
but if it's being used in commerce and if they can prove it is, then you are liable. But we're
Right.
not. We're not living in commerce. At one time, people did. If you go back a few hundred years, people worked in they lived in their workshop, or their workshop was above, that's how people first started to trade and were members of guilds and things. But that's going back 200 or 300 years. We're not in that situation. Now people are just living in homes,
Mm-hmm.
not these dwellings.
Yep. Yep.
But the law hasn't. But the law for their jurisdiction to work, it has to be in commerce, which is why they can only do it that way. I absolutely I get it now. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
And they buried it.
And they
Remember I
buried
said,
it.
remember part three? Okay, we're going to
Yes.
get into that. That comes up a little bit later.
Right.
But see on the bottom, there's the M1 and the M2 that we were referring to previously.
Yeah.
If you
Yes.
click, you can't do it here, but if you had the actual statute up and you clicked M1 and M2, you'll see there that it says 1967. Okay, that was there's a certain act, and that's the Raid Act, and we're going to find out there's even problems with that. And then it says 19. What's the one underneath that?
19. Oh, I haven't got it on the screen now.
1988. It's on my screen. I think it says 1988. Anyway, those two things are there, and that's just where we start to get into the weeds, and we find out
Yeah.
what we need to find out. And so
Yeah.
what
No,
they did was they buried this information in a previous act, and they tell you to refer to it, but they don't give you what it actually says. Well, why did they do that? Because the truth is there, and if you don't look it up, that's your problem.
right.
Well, I did look it up. That's how this presentation got built.
Brilliant. Okay. Let's. Shall we swiftly
Go to the
move
next,
on?
yeah, go to the next slide and we'll carry on. Now, we're looking now at the Local Government Finance Act 1992, like before. Liability to pay council tax shall be determined on a daily basis. Okay, big deal. For the purpose of determining of the day whether the property is a chargeable dwelling. Well, wait a minute. Aren't all properties chargeable dwellings? No. It says if it's chargeable. So that tells you right there that some property is and some property isn't.
Right.
Okay. And then under B, it says which valuation band shows the building authority is the valuation list is applicable to any chargeable dwelling. So that would tell me that, okay, some of these valuation bands are not chargeable because that's what it's kind of indicating.
Right.
Okay. The person liable to pay council tax in respect to any of the dwelling or whether any amount of council tax is subject to a discount. This is where I got into it earlier. And I said some people may want a discount on their council tax for various reasons. So this is to tell you that it's possible. If
Yes.
so, the amount of the discount shall be assumed in a state of affairs, and we're going to get into that. So those people that don't want to necessarily, ditch council tax entirely because they don't want the headache, you can potentially get a discount. This is why I'm bringing this thing to you,
Yeah.
right? And they wouldn't have all these words and stuff in here if all taxes were equal and everybody was treated fairly and everybody was equal. But
No.
it tells
Quite.
you this indicates that there is a way out. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to start uncovering some more of this. Now, the Local Government Finance Act, you'll notice here, I showed you here, it's parts of it, and there's the original act and there's the amended act. We'll go back to the original one and you'll see what you need to figure out. Now, this thing, if I remember right, I can't read that because it's too small on my screen, but anyway, it talks about a Section 13A officer. That's where we're coming up to. And if you, yeah, that is 13A. That's, unfortunately, that's a little small, but I had to try and get it to fit on the slide. Okay, there we go.
Oh, hang on.
Whoops, we had it. We'll figure out how to work this stuff yet. Okay, now on top there it says charges over time under Section 13A. So for the people that want to turn around and get a discount, maybe you're on a disability, maybe your house is being renovated or has been renovated for somebody with a disability. Maybe you're a student. Maybe you're not there part of the time. Maybe you're like it's a seasonal home. You use it 6 months of the year or something. Or maybe it's non-furnished. Then you have a right to write to the Section 13A officer at your municipality or at your council and ask for a discount and explain your situation. Okay? Maybe you lost your job, but you're not trying to get out of taxes. You just need a little bit of time to pay it off or pay it down. So you go through the Section 13A officer. That's what it is, okay? This is where a person is liable to pay council tax in respect to a chargeable dwelling on the day of the building authority. The area in which the dwelling is situated may reduce the amount which is liable to pay in respect to the dwelling. And then it carries on. So I'm just showing you that it is possible to potentially get a discount.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we go to the next slide, we'll carry on.
Okay, bear with me.
Yep. Now, this, I'm not quite sure why that happened, but it's a repeat. But it just shows you charges over time, Section 13A. I blew it up. That's all, just to show you it's Section 13A.
Oh, okay.
That's all. Now,
and is that's the same thing?
That's the same thing. It's just blown up a little bit so people can read it. Now I told you to remember that we were dealing with part 3 of an act earlier. Okay. And I said it references back to an older act. In this case, it goes back to the Local Government Finance Act 2012. Now, when we check under section part 3, look what it says. I've highlighted it for you. Non-domestic rating. Okay? So there's a difference between domestic and non-domestic. That's the point of this, right?
Yeah.
Now, if they're referencing it to a non-domestic rating under Part 3, and that was one of their requirements to match everything so the dwelling was taxable, well, wait a minute. Where you live is not non-domestic. It's in fact domestic. So therefore, under Part 3, is your property taxable, Richard?
Well, not according to that.
Thank you. There you go. And then it says local retention of non-domestic rates. Okay. So now it gets into that. Now that would be a whole presentation into itself, but I'm just trying to give you the overview.
Yeah, no, appreciate.
Yeah. Now, if we go to the next slide, we'll find out some more stuff. Now, what I did was part of that, because it was so long, I basically put the bottom part on, the top part and the bottom part, and then you'd have to read through this here subsection. But you're going to find out, well, I'm not going to get you to read that, but what you're going to find out is the Building Authority of England may make a scheme specifically, okay, which deals with certain sections of this non-domestic property, right? Now, it says a person who, anyway, it carries on into this, and you'll see under here, section 13A, because remember we were talking about the tax deduction.
Yeah.
It says on the bottom under F1, section 13A, subsection, blah, 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 2012, Local Government Finance Act 2012, and it gives the chapter. So you can see that one of these acts refers to the other one, and then conversely, this one will refer to the opposite one, back and forth. So you have a right. So now you can say, okay, I'm going to use your law against you. You're the guys that wrote it or whatever. So under section 13A, everybody has the right to ask for a reduction in property taxes because we've shown that's possible. And your argument is, well, your property tax only applies to non-domestic property. So I would like all my taxes back, thank you kindly. And I would like to be removed from your tax record. And you don't need to go to court. You send in this paperwork, you send in a letter, and that's the end of it. They can't dispute it.
Because there it is in black and white, especially if you point to the links in the page.
Exactly. And this is why when I do presentations for you, originally this was a bit of a, how are we going to do this? I'm showing you the law, guys. So you can follow along. It's not just Dan's opinion. It's right there in black and white.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That
you
is
got to
amazing.
read, and you have to read all these things. And where does this link follow? Where does that link follow? When I did the council tax thing, when I was dealing with it, it was an appeal we were going through. It took me 4 days. I filed 80 pages into the court. And there was even conflicts within the court itself, and we can get into that in a separate thing at some point if we want to. But basically, they said at that time that the court was going to get assistance from the defendant. Well, how the heck is that a fair trial? The defendant's not there to assist the court, and then the other defendant, because what we did was we said, okay, we're going to go after the council, right? And we're going to go after the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse court. And the one said, we're not even going to file a defense. We're not entertaining this. So they've already left the battlefield. He who leaves the battlefield first loses. It's a legal maxim in law. So if the one defendant's relying on the defense of the other defendant who's now said they're not going to defend it, guess what? You win.
You win.
Yeah. Crazy day, eh? Anyway, let's go to the next slide.
All right. I got to find it.
Now, when we started out, there was an M1 and an M2, and it said the General Rates Act. So, Richard, if I'm going to get you to read the highlighted section, what does it say?
This is slide, where are we? 17. Bear with me. I'll get that up on the screen here, so that, not there, so we can read it as I read it.
Okay.
It says, every rating authority shall have power in accordance with this act to make and levy rates on the basis of an assessment in respect of the yearly value of property in their rating area for the purpose of applying the proceeds thereof to local purposes of a public nature.
Right. So remember I said we found out that the local council was divesting in military hardware?
Yes.
So how is that of a public nature? How does that benefit? And then up above where you said in respect to a yearly value, well, they don't take into account the actual value of your property, right? Let's just forget the part that it's non-domestic, domestic. They haven't done a property assessment of your property. They never do.
No, they don't.
Right.
They never come around.
There's another. There you go. So, and why would you want them in your property on your?
Well, exactly. You wouldn't really.
Right. So the next thing now, if we keep reading the next line, it gets even worse.
No authority or person other than the rating authority shall have the power to make or levy within any rating area any such rate as are mentioned in subsection 2 of this section for the purposes so mentioned other than accepted rates.
Right. So now I ask you, how does the municipality have the right to raise your council tax, property tax, if it doesn't have the right to do it, and it has to fall under this act? So therefore, all those increases to supposedly support fire and police and other emergency services or trash collection, whatever, how do they have the authority to do that when the specific rating says they don't?
Wow. That's amazing. It's all there for us to discover, and we don't discover it.
Yeah, answer me that, Richard. So if they don't have the right to do that, let me go back to our legal maxims and says fraud destroys all that it touches. So now, because the municipality, your council and court has committed an act of fraud, you have perfect grounds to say, I don't want to pay your council tax anymore. I don't know what all these funds are going for. I know in some cases it's gone towards military investments.
Yes.
BlackRock and all these other companies. So didn't I just blow the living crap out of this council tax?
Well, you did. The thing is, people do go and say this is what's going on. I mean, at least now you can point to exactly why they shouldn't be able to do it, as you say. But they just ignore you because these people do not play by the rules.
They can't ignore you. And we'll get into that. At some point when we get around to it, if we get around to it, I will go through council tax and we will learn how to apply towards their court legal maxims, and we'll learn how to do an appeal.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Anyway, that's why I try to show people the actual news and the evidence and the paperwork. Yeah. So let's carry on. Now, the General Rates Act there, what does it say where I've highlighted it?
Oh gosh, I've got to find. You see, I've got the same problem as you have until I actually bring it up on
Yeah.
this screen here, and it says where you've highlighted it.
Yep.
The council may estimate for what amount the precept will be issued.
Right. So this is what this is talking about to save you reading the whole thing. It says
Thanks.
that the council may set an assessed value on what they determine, and it's an estimate. Now you tell me what company can turn around and say, well, we estimate this is our cost for next year. Well, where's your accounting ledger? Where's your accountability? They don't
Yeah,
have any. They
quite.
just say this is what we think it'll be.
Yes. How have they
Well,
worked it out?
yeah. And so how did they figure it out? So, well, hey, we want to spend a bunch of money and give somebody a good retirement package so our amounts go up. Where's your accountability? Where's your records? And it already says right in there they're not allowed to do it unless it's under the General Rates Act and it's been agreed to by the minister. So again, they have no legal right to do this, especially when I did the research and we found out there was a whole bunch of hotel bills and restaurant bills from the council. So how does that benefit the public? Because remember, it was supposed to be for the public good.
Yeah, well, this is it. You know, they're all going out to lunch. I mean, it's a huge amount of benefit to be able to watch these rich people scoffing their faces and us peering through the window going, spare me a little crumb, would you?
Yeah.
It's immense benefit to me to feel that I can't afford that. Anyway,
So
we shift. Yes,
I'll shift on to the next one.
we're shifting on now.
Yeah. Now this thing here, Local Government Finance Act 1988. This goes back. See, remember I said they all interrelate. So now I went back to 1988. And what does it deal with Part 3, Richard? What does it say there?
I knew.
Non-domestic property.
Is that what it says? Yes,
Yeah.
non-domestic property. Oh yes, back to non-domestic property.
Yeah. So even before we were at 2012, well, now we're back to 1998.
Right, which is nothing to do with us if you're sitting in a house at home.
Right. So even that doesn't work right. 1988, and you know, and again, it's non-domestic property.
Right.
Next slide. Now, we know that all these councils are businesses.
Mm.
And there was a court case in the United States called Clearfield Trust versus the United States. It happened in 1943. And basically, it says anybody that operates like a business is subject to the same rules as every other individual or any other corporation. So because these councils are in fact a business and they all have DUNS numbers, which is a business registration number, they're subject to the same rules as us. So can you tell me why when they go into their so-called court, they're getting preferential treatment where they actually hire the court, where no file number exists on your court file when it's dealing with the respect to council tax, and why you're filing paperwork with the enemy, the plaintiff that's bringing you to court, when they're supposed to be subject to the same rules as any other private individual, which is you or me, or any other corporation?
Well, quite. I mean, it's absolute fraudulent behaviour.
Now, doesn't fraud destroy all that it touches?
It does, indeed.
Right. So now, all we have to do, and I'm asking for the people's help on this, all you need to do is send a copy of your notice of liability, or even better still, your so-called conviction under the local court. And what we do, if we can gather these pieces of evidence, we can turn on and shut down the entire court and say, well, you can't do this because under this system, and we can prove you're a business. I have all the DUNS numbers of all the councils. Or if I don't have it, if I'm missing one, well, somebody can let me know. But I got a hell of a number of them. And so what it is, say, well, you're subject to the same rules as everybody else. So why are you hiring the court? Why are we filing paperwork with the council and not the court? Why is there no court file number on the documents? Why are we not allowed to present our evidence? Why are we not allowed to cross-examine? Why are these hearings done in private over the phone? How come they're not done in public? How come they're not done under oath?
Yeah, exactly.
Everything you've done is illegal. Now, if we had half a dozen people,
how is it they've got away with it for so bloody long?
Nobody holds them accountable.
Exactly. But as you say, if we had enough people
Well, the buck stops on the Richard Volk show today, guys. I mean, nobody's exposed this as far as I know, in regards
No,
to this non-domestic property.
no,
So
you're the only one.
yeah, so no, well, you'd know better than me. But so therefore, we've just ended council tax. Now, anybody that's been convicted of these non-payment of council tax, you have the right to an appeal,
Absolutely.
and we will do a separate presentation on how to file an appeal if there's interest.
And there will be massive interest.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we can go on to the next slide, but there you go. Now, the Clearfield Doctrine just explains the overall. Okay, now who's liable for council tax? Section 6 of the Local Government Finance Act outlines who's payable for council tax. Liability falls primarily on the persons who occupy a property as their main residence. That's what they'd have you believe,
Yes.
right? That's what they tell you. But as we now know from looking at the darn paperwork, that's not true. In the case of multiple occupants, joint and severally liable may apply to the meaning of each occupant as an individually or collective. So what they're telling you under their act, because they didn't read into it, didn't read the rest of it, if a husband and wife are living at the same space, basically, they're going to say, well, if one's not paying, the other one's liable. But as you now know, that's not true because your property in itself is likely non-taxable.
Right.
Oh, and it says owners of unoccupied properties may also be liable for council tax under certain circumstances, as outlined in Section 8. This goes back to my argument under Section 13A. Okay, unoccupied properties may also be liable. And so you'll be liable for some council tax if you don't wish to say the whole thing is illegal. But this tells you that you have a redress now and you can ask for a discount. That's why I brought that up.
Right. And actually, you mentioned that when I was looking after my dad,
Mhm.
and we had to sell his house, and he was in a home,
Mhm.
the house was unoccupied, but we
Yeah,
still had to pay, even though it was unoccupied,
you
and
can
we
go
still had to
back.
pay.
Yeah, if it was fairly recent, you could go back and say, I'd like a discount, please, under Section 13A.
Yeah, that we got a discount, I think, for 3 months or something, and
Mhm.
then it came to the full price, and there was nobody in it, so we weren't needing the we weren't needing the street lights and the bins, but they
Mhm.
said, yes, but what if it catches fire? You'll need the fire brigade, won't you? So that's where they sort of stumped me then, but that was before I knew as much as I do now,
Yeah, yeah,
which
that's
isn't much. But luckily, I know people who do know stuff. Right.
Now, Section 11 of the Local Government Finance Act provides for various exemptions from council tax. And this is where you can use these arguments to reduce your council tax. Exemptions may apply to properties that are unoccupied due to certain reasons, as we just discovered, such
Right.
as being vacant or unfurnished or undergoing major repairs or structural alterations. Other exemptions may include properties occupied solely by students or individuals with severe mental impairment or certain diplomats. Well, how come the diplomats get tax exemptions?
Yeah, that's interesting. And what qualifies you to be a diplomat? I'm a diplomat. I can be diplomatic occasionally. Very rarely, actually. I'm quite undiplomatic, but I could try.
The applications all accounts. Section
Yeah.
13A of the Act outlines additional exemptions for properties occupied by certain religious communities
Yeah.
and members. So how come
Well,
they're getting? And then visiting members of the armed forces will are on what we call TD, which is temporary duty. So they may be living in a property only temporary to fulfill their job application. So I'm showing you that even if you don't want to ditch council tax entirely, you may be able to apply for a discount.
right.
That's all. Okay. Now, if we go to the next slide, that tells you right there, Section 13A of the Act, which is exactly what I said. Single person discount is commonly a reduction available to individuals living alone. It's outlined in Section 11, Sub 2 of the Act. So there you go. I'm showing you where potentially you may get a discount. Some
And
people have gotten
I
their,
do get this. I get the single person's discount on mine.
yeah, the cat doesn't count.
No, the cat doesn't live here. He just comes in and eats and leaves.
Taxpayers have the right to challenge council tax assessments through the appeals process. This is why I said you should do this prior to going to court. Section
Right.
16 of the Local Government Finance Act provides for the grounds which the appeal can be made, including errors in valuation or classification. Now, if you do have an error issue, what I suggest is write to the valuation band, which we've covered in a previous presentation, and explain the situation and tell them why you'd like this thing, reassessed, and send the
Yeah.
same notice to the towns so that you don't end up with, well, this one didn't know, that one didn't know. Make sure they both know. Now, if we end up getting railroaded in the court, like many of us have, taxpayers may also appeal to the High Court on points of law, as outlined in Section 16, sub 7 of the Act. And this is a whole separate presentation. But I'm just telling you, there is a redress. Now,
Yeah.
fraud doesn't have an expiration date. So even if it happened to you more than 2 years ago, you could say, yes, but that was fraud. And I just discovered this thanks to the Richard Bowden show. Therefore, here's why I want to do the appeal. Now, this is an example. Property owners successfully appealed their council tax based on evidence of comparable properties in the area, permitted under Section 16(1)(a) of the Local Government Finance Act. So if you find out your local neighbors have an issue, maybe you want to form a co-op and say, hey, we should all appeal this, right? And then the whole thing will go down. A
Right.
disabled person receives a reduction in their council tax bill after demonstrating their property has been adapted for their needs in accordance with Section 11(a) of the Act. Right?
Right.
Those are just two examples that I was referring to earlier. Now, ethical considerations. While there may be legal avenues to reduce or avoid council tax, taxpayers should ensure they're acting ethically in accordance with the law. And that's the reason why we've presented this presentation. Attempting to evade or fraudulently avoid council tax can result in penalties, fines, and legal consequences. Now, I'm going to correct something here. Section 35 of the Local Government Finance Act outlines the penalties for failure to provide information, but you're not required to provide it unless they ask for it. So don't volunteer the information. So if you move into a property, don't bother telling them. If
Right.
they don't request it, then who cares?
Exactly.
And this way here, you don't provide false information, which is perjury related to council tax, and there you go. Now, practical tips for compliance. Taxpayers should familiarize themselves with the council tax laws. That's the purpose of what we're doing. And seek professional advice. Well, you're going to have to ask Richard or myself or somebody that's read this stuff and actually comprehends it. Keeping records of all correspondence with the local authorities as evidence to support any claim for exemption, because you may need it in an appeals case. Okay. And the reductions can help in case of disputes. So if you told them, don't give them the original letters of anything. Make sure you get copies. And then regularly review these council tax assessments, because I've been informed that periodically they get raised for who knows what reason, right? It was this last year, and all of a sudden it's gone up 10%. Some cases it's gone up 20%, 30%, even 50%. And I said, ask the council for why they did this, and they'd say, well, it's to pay for the increase in fire and police. Then go back to that earlier document where I showed you it has to fall under the general rates category. And
Right.
therefore you can ask for a reduction. And a lot of people got messed over because of that increase. Your taxes go up 25%. What the heck? Understanding council tax laws and exemptions and discounts in the appeals process is essential for taxpayers to get their obligations heard effectively. All right. And if you can demonstrate where it's not applicable to you, as we've now done, and so people should seek certain, further advice from looking at the actual statute. That's where you're going to find the law. If you ask the enemy or the bully in the playground, what are my rights? He's not going to tell you.
No, quite.
Right. And so one of the reasons behind what we do with Richard and I and some of his guests is we're showing you, what the law says. And in my case, what I always do is give a slide presentation because I want to show you the actual law. And then all you got to do is look for it. Right. If you have to, you can go on YouTube or download it or whatever and pause it, go get the act and write it right in your own book. And what I do is I print out books and stick them in a binder. And then I stick all of the acts and statutes related to the certain subject area in that binder. And if I ever need to use it or reference it, I can actually take the binder apart, photocopy the page, and stick it in the document I send off to wherever I'm going. Right? Now, addressing concerns about council tax enforcement process requires a lot of concerted effort. So I take a bit of time to do this stuff, and so should anybody else. Don't take our word for it. The best thing you can do is say, okay, this is what I was told. Let's go verify it. Because if you don't comprehend your own court case and you get into court trying to read it from a script, you will get buried. But if
Yeah,
you know the court thing inside out, you know your case inside out, and somebody will throw something at you and you'll have the answer, bang, bang, bang. This, well, you can't do an appeal. Yes, I can under Section 13A. I can do it under these guidelines. Even if you bring in a separate set of notes, I don't care. Now, what we need to do, and part of what Richard's presentations do, is raise awareness to hold these people, accountable.
that's right.
Right? That's why we do what we do. Okay, this presentation basically is an invitation to ask questions. I've listened to some of Richard's presentations, and I have questions. I say, can you connect me with so and so, and I'll send them my questions. Now, Richard, in some cases, turns around and says people that contact him, and he turns around and says, "Do you mind if I send this to you? Can you look into it?" And if it's something normal, I can usually do it, and I don't mind doing it because collectively we're supposed to be on the same page.
What exactly?
So that's the way it is. So with that, Richard, do you have any other I think we're on the last slide. Do you have any further questions? If you need to, I'm working on a book. I stated that before, which deals with council tax. If somebody's interested in that, you can send an email to that email address, smcdonal@kos.net, and I'll certainly let you know. Now, based on the number of presentations I've done regarding council tax, I think this is the fourth one. This thing gets fairly elaborate, fairly complicated.
Yeah.
And it's, we're trying to squeeze all of this within an hour, and I usually go over the limit, but I'm trying to get the information out, right?
No, no,
So,
and you do, and absolutely, and I appreciate. I mean, I appreciate the time, and for some people it may be a little dry, because we're looking at the acts. But the point is that you've got to understand that, and this is what I'm understanding. And I
yeah,
mean, the biggest takeaway from this is the shocker, really, is the fact that the council tax is for the dwelling, as they've put it, is for commercial property as
yeah,
opposed to what you and I live in, which would be a home, and yet we've all fallen foul of this, and yet there it is in black and white.
yeah. There's no
It
disputing it.
There's no disputing it, and so it takes people now to go back and look at those bits of legislation, interpret it for themselves, or find somebody who perhaps can help them interpret it to see that they agree with
Yeah.
what you've just claimed,
Hmm.
and then they can write their letters to the council and just ask them a question. Say, I know you've just sent me this bill for the council tax. I'm a bit confused because according to legislation, this is for dwellings, and the meaning of dwellings is, and you can put their own meanings, and I actually live in a home, and I have all these things which are not taxed. So you've
Yeah.
obviously made a mistake by sending me this bill. Thank you very much. Good to have. Hope we have a nice day. Goodbye.
Yeah, and give them a timeline to respond.
Of course. Yes.
Give them 10 days or something and say, this is private property,
Yeah.
right?
If you refute this, please can you show me the legislation in which you can prove that the things I've presented is not correct?
Right.
And if they can do that, then great guns. But if they can't, and they keep coming back to that, yeah, actually, this is the meaning of a dwelling, then they're
Okay.
kind of stuffed.
Right. And if they haul you into court, well, Your Honor, I'm challenging subject matter jurisdiction. This case can't move forward now because subject matter jurisdiction must be settled before everything else. And given the fact that counsel is paid for this time to use the court, the thing's submitted in bulk, there's no court file number. I can't file paperwork in the court, and it applies to non-domestic property. Now you've shut the court down. Game over. They say, well, we don't care about that. Well, maybe you don't, but the law does.
Yeah,
So then I don't care about their order either because they can, put that where the sun doesn't shine because it's not applicable to you.
exactly.
That's why you have to go through all the statutes and the acts. It's a pain in the butt, but that's the only way you get to.
Well, listen,
And
we've just gone.
yeah,
No,
we
go
just
on.
gone over the limit. Yeah. The thing is, if you don't read those acts and statutes, they can pull one over on you.
Yeah, and most
So,
people don't read them because they don't know where to find the necessary bits for one thing, and even when they read them, it's very hard to interpret them. And so it's great that people like yourself, who've spent all this time learning how to read this sort of stuff, can at least show us where these these elements are, and then we can look at them and pull them to bits and go, actually, yeah, in common English language, Oxford English Dictionary language, this means this, and therefore it's actually not applying to me, whereas I thought it was because they said so. And just because they say so, I mean, it could be anybody. Plus the fact, as you so well eloquently said, they're businesses anyway. So what right has one business coming to you to ask for McDonald's may as well just say, look, I know we sell hamburgers, but we would like a couple of grand from you just for the fun of it because we're a business.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, of course, isn't the McDonald that we're talking to today, which is Stan McDonald, which is a different type of McDonald, a nice McDonald.
No, I'm thankful that we have your platform to be able to bring this information out because
Well,
some
we've
people
got.
are getting shortchanged and they don't know
Well,
what to
they
do.
are, and this is intolerable. Intolerable. We've got one coming up on smart meters and something else. I can't remember what it was, but I know you've got some more presentations which we shall look forward to.
Land patents was the other one.
Was what one?
Land patents.
Oh yeah, land patents and
Yeah.
all of that. So lots more to look forward to. But in the meantime, I better end it now. But thank you very much, Stan. Really enjoyed that. Sorry, I've got a bit of a croaky old voice and not on the top of my game. And my reading was atrocious. I appreciate that. I'll have to read the slides in advance next time. But anyway, appreciate you coming on. I hope that's been interesting to you, the lovely viewer. Of course, none of this is legal advice. You go and take your own legal advice if you feel fit to do so. But there it is on legislation.co.uk for you to interpret. I'll be back with more monologues, hopefully with a clearer voice next time and wonderful guests. But until the next one from Stan and I, exploding the myths and the reality, take care and see you soon. Bye for now.